when a group of bikers decides to pick on the wrong woman. Tensions in a small town spiral into something no one could have predicted. What would you do if your peaceful life was suddenly torn apart by violence? Let us know in the comments section below, and make sure to stay tuned to see how courage and loyalty take center stage. When a group of bikers decides to pick on the wrong woman, tensions in a small town spiral into something no one could have predicted. What would you do if your peaceful life was suddenly torn apart by violence? Let us know in the comments section below, and make sure to stay tuned to see how courage and loyalty take center stage. Catherine Hatfield wiped the sweat from her brow, the back of her hands stained with the dust and grime of a morning spent harvesting. Her boots were caked in dry mud, and her faded jeans bore the marks of honest work, but she wore them like a badge of pride. 32 years old, lean and strong, Catherine carried herself with the quiet certainty of someone who had earned every square inch of her little farm through back-breaking labor and sheer grit. She adjusted the sun-bleached ball cap over her brown hair, worn short for practicality, and surveyed the spread of fresh produce she'd lined up along the old wooden table at the end of her driveway. Tomatoes as red as sunsets, squash and zucchini stacked neatly in wooden crates, corn bundled in twine, everything set out with care for the locals who trusted her stand more than any grocery store. Behind her stood the heart of Hatfield Acres, a modest two-story farmhouse with peeling white paint and a wraparound porch. It wasn't much, but it was hers, and after all she'd fought through, the bad loans, the dry seasons, the nights she almost lost hope, Catherine wasn't about to let anything threaten it, which made the rumble of approaching engines set her teeth on edge. It wasn't uncommon to hear motorcycles on the county road. This was free country, after all, but the sound today wasn't casual. It was a wall of noise, loud and purposeful, like a thunderclap of trouble. Catherine's hand instinctively brushed the pocket of her jeans, feeling the reassuring weight of her folding knife. Not much against real danger, but enough to buy her time if it came to that. The first bike came into view over the rise, then two more. They weren't the polite weekend riders she sometimes saw. These were rough, heavy machines, filthy and growling, plastered with skulls and flames. The lead biker pulled up close, the front tire kicking dust onto her table. His leathers were cracked and worn, patches stitched across the back that spelled out a name she recognized from town whispers: Iron Dogs. Outlaw bikers, trouble wrapped in horsepower and bad intentions. The man swung off his bike like he owned the land, yanking off his helmet and revealing a bald head tattooed with a snarling wolf. His beard was a tangle of gray and black, and a silver hoop hung from his nose. Rex Crusher Dalton. Catherine had heard the name before, muttered in fear by townsfolk too wise to say it aloud. Extortion, fights, drugs. The Iron Dogs were a plague that law enforcement tried and failed to chase out. Rex sauntered toward the stand, his boots leaving deep prints in the dirt. His eyes, cold, pale blue, raked over the produce with mock curiosity. Behind him, Slim Barker, skinny, rat-faced, missing a front tooth, hopped off his bike, laughing to himself. "Well, well," Rex drawled, his voice like gravel. "Ain't this just the cutest little setup? Looks real cozy." Catherine straightened her back, refusing to let fear creep into her voice. "It's not for you. Keep moving." Slim whistled low. "Feisty." Rex grinned, but there was no humor in it. "We're just admirins, sweetheart. Don't get your overalls in a twist." He reached out, plucked a tomato from the stand and bit into it, juice dribbling down his beard. Then he spat the pulp into the dirt at her feet. Catherine's fists clenched at her sides. "You running a business here, or is this just charity?" Rex asked. "Because if it's business, well, business needs protection. Dangerous times, you know." Catherine met his stare dead on. "Get off my land." Slim laughed louder now, sauntering toward one of the crates. Without hesitation, he kicked it over, sending vegetables scattering into the dust. Catherine lunged forward, grabbing his wrist hard enough to make him yelp. That was when Rex moved. Faster than his heavy frame suggested, he shoved Catherine back with one arm, sending her stumbling into the edge of the table. Pain shot through her ribs, but she stayed on her feet. "You listen good," Rex snarled. "This here? It's our county now. Folks pay respect, or they pay consequences." A few locals slowed their trucks along the road, watching with wide eyes but unwilling to intervene. Catherine burned with humiliation. Not just because she was being pushed around, but because no one would stand up. No one but her. Slim grabbed another crate, ready to wreck more, when a voice cut through the chaos. "Hey!" Every head turned. At the end of the driveway, stepping out of a battered green pickup, was a man built like a fortress. Worn jeans, a plain black t-shirt stretched over his broad shoulders, and eyes that could strip paint off a wall just by looking at it. He moved with the easy precision of a predator, or a soldier. Jack Hatfield, Catherine's ex-husband, the man she hadn't seen in 5 years. The man who once led missions with Delta Force into places so dark that nightmares had nightmares about them. Rex's smile faltered just a little. Jack said nothing at first. He just stood there, radiating a calm so sharp it was almost violent. Catherine's heart pounded, not out of fear, but something else she couldn't name yet. Finally, Jack took a slow step forward. "You got 3 seconds to get off her property." Slim's hand twitched toward his belt. Catherine froze, recognizing the body language instantly. But Jack moved faster. In one blur of motion, he closed the distance, twisted Slim's arm behind his back, and shoved him face first into the dirt. Rex lunged, but Jack didn't even flinch. His foot snapped out, catching Rex square in the knee. The biker howled and went down hard, clutching his leg. "You idiots don't even know the storm you just walked into," Jack said, voice cold and even. He released Slim with a shove and looked straight at Rex. "Tell your friends. Tell 'em all. Hatfield land is off limits." The 2 bikers scrambled back to their bikes, shooting furious glares over their shoulders, but neither dared say another word. Engines roared as they tore away, throwing gravel in their retreat. Catherine exhaled, not realizing until then she'd been holding her breath. Jack turned to her, and for a heartbeat they just stared at each other. 5 years of silence crashing into one look. "You all right?" he asked quietly. She nodded stiffly. "I had it handled." Jack gave a ghost of a smile. Looked like it. But both of them knew, deep down, that today was just the beginning. And the storm was only just gathering. Jack leaned against the battered pickup, arms folded across his chest, as Catherine scooped what was left of her produce back into the crates. She didn't ask for help. She didn't have to. Jack knew better than to insult her pride with an offer she wasn't ready to accept. He watched her work in silence, the heat between them thick, not from anger, but from the weight of everything left unsaid. "You look good, Cat," he said finally, his voice low. Catherine didn't look up. She tossed a bruised tomato into a bucket and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Didn't expect to see you back here." "Wasn't planning on it," Jack admitted. "Got a call from Tommy Evans. Said you might need a hand." At that, Catherine froze. She turned slowly, fixing him with a glare sharp enough to cut steel. "I don't need charity, and I sure as hell don't need rescuing." Jack pushed off the truck, coming to stand a few feet from her. "Didn't say you did, but when a couple of iron dogs show up on your land, it's not about pride, it's about survival." Catherine's jaw tightened. She hated that he was right. She hated even more that a part of her felt relief the moment she saw him step out of that truck. "You didn't have to stay gone, Jack," she said, quieter now, the words catching in her throat before they spilled out. "You chose to." Jack looked away, the hard lines of his face briefly cracking. "Wasn't a choice I wanted to make, but it was the only way to protect you." "Protect me?" Catherine laughed, but it was hollow, bitter. "You broke us, Jack. You didn't protect anything. For a moment, silence reigned again. Only the rustling of the fields in the distance filled the space between them. Jack knelt to help her gather the last of the vegetables, slow and deliberate, offering no argument. Catherine sat back on her heels, watching him. This wasn't the man who had laughed. Angry, lost, hollowed out by battles both seen and unseen, this Jack moved with purpose, with restraint. Something had changed. Before she could ask, the sound of gravel crunching under tires snapped both of their heads up. The sheriff's cruiser rolled down the driveway, the lights off, but the presence unmistakable. Deputy Wade Collins stepped out, hat tucked under his arm, eyes scanning the battered stand, the mess in the dirt, and finally settling on Jack. "Hatfield," Wade said with a nod, then shifted his gaze. "Jack, heard you were back. Not planning on staying long," Jack replied coolly. Wade chewed on that for a second, then looked at Catherine. "You all right?" "I'm fine," she said stiffly. Wade surveyed the damage again. Rex Dalton, wasn't it? Jack nodded. "Him and Slim Barker." Wade let out a slow breath. "Those two've been stirring up dust all over the county. Sheriff's trying to keep a lid on it, but—" He trailed off, the implication hanging heavy. The law could only do so much when the gang outnumbered the deputies 5-1. "They won't stop with just a warning," Jack said, eyes narrowing. "They'll be back." Catherine's stomach twisted, but she kept her face neutral. Wade shifted awkwardly. "Look, I can make a report, start a file, but you know how it is. Unless they lay hands on you in front of a badge, it's just your word against theirs." "Figures," Captain muttered. Wade hesitated, then stepped closer. "You might want to think about getting some backup. A lot of folks around here are scared to stand up to the dogs, but not everybody." Jack caught the meaning and gave a slight nod. "I'll handle it." Wade seemed satisfied enough with that. He tipped his hat. "Y'all be careful. If anything else happens, you call me direct." As the cruiser rolled away, Catherine picked up a fallen crate and slammed it onto the table harder than necessary. "Back up?" she repeated bitterly. "What am I supposed to do? Hire mercenaries?" Jack leaned on the table, meeting her glare without flinching. "You're not alone, Cat. Not anymore." "And what happens when you leave again, Jack?" she snapped. "Because you will. You always do." Jack's face hardened, the easy calm gone. "Not this time." She shook her head, laughing without humor. "You can't fix this? Not by playing hero?" Jack straightened. "I'm not here to play anything. I'm here because those guys crossed a line. And if you think I'm going to let them hurt you or destroy what you built, you don't know me as well as you used to." Catherine opened her mouth to fire back, but the sudden movement at the edge of the property caught her attention. A dusty pickup truck rumbled toward them, its driver throwing a hand out the window in greeting. Tommy Evans pulled up beside Jack's truck, stepping out with a grim look on his face. Mid-50s, wiry and tough as leather, Tommy had been a friend of Catherine's father and had looked out for her since she was a teenager. "You all right, girl?" he asked, peering at her with sharp gray eyes. "I'm fine," Captain said automatically. Tommy nodded at Jack. "Figured you'd be here by now. Knew you wouldn't leave her twisting in the wind." Jack gave a tight smile. "Thanks for the call, Tommy." Tommy's face darkened. "You need to know. It ain't just here. Rex and his boys hit old man Carter's feed store last night, tore up the place, threatened his grandkids." Catherine's blood ran cold. "They're moving fast," Tommy continued, "looking to scare everybody into paying protection before anyone can organize against them." Jack rubbed the back of his neck, thinking. "They'll come back here. Maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow." Catherine looked between them, feeling the old fear creep up again. But beneath it, something fiercer stirred, the part of her that refused to be a victim. "What are you thinking?" she asked Jack. He gave her that old familiar grin, the one that used to drive her crazy back when things were good between them. "I'm thinking we make it real unpleasant for them when they do." Tommy chuckled low in his throat. "Might know a few fellas who'd be interested in helping with that." Catherine crossed her arms, eyeing them both. You're talking about fighting. We're talking about defending what's ours, Jack said simply. You, this land, this town. She hesitated. It wasn't who she was, violence, retaliation. But after today, after seeing how easily they could sweep in and tear everything apart, maybe it was time to stop hoping the world would play fair. Maybe it was time to remind these men that the backbone of a farmer could be just as unbreakable as any soldier's. Catherine Hatfield lifted her chin. Then we'd better make a plan. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows over the fields as the three of them stood in the dirt, battered produce forgotten at their feet, and began to talk about war. They spoke in low tones, mapping out lines of defense, fallback points, and signals. Tommy mentioned calling a few trusted neighbors, men who still remembered what it meant to stand together when the law couldn't. Jack outlined how to use the land itself, the old irrigation ditches, the split-rail fences, to their advantage. By the time dusk began to fall, painting the horizon in streaks of blood red and gold, the plan was set. They would not run, they would not hide, and when the iron dogs came back, because everyone knew they wouldn't find a woman standing alone anymore. They would find a fight they hadn't bargained for. And maybe, just maybe, they'd finally learn that in this town, loyalty ran deeper than fear. Jack crouched low by the fence line, hammering a fresh nail into one of the posts, reinforcing it with a length of rusted barbed wire he'd found in the barn. It wasn't much, but it would slow anyone foolish enough to come barreling through in the dark. Catherine watched from the porch, arms crossed tight over her chest, the twilight deepening into a heavy purple haze around them. The hours since they had made their decision felt like standing on the edge of a storm, the world holding its breath. She had called a few trusted friends, men like Tommy Evans and old Rick Paxton who ran the lumber mill, younger guys too, Will Carter and Joey Barnes, boys she'd known since they were knee-high, who had returned home after the army or after hard years of wandering. The loyalty that answered her call stunned her. Within hours, pickups and rusted farm trucks rumbled down the long drive, headlights cutting through the growing gloom. Hands, calloused from field work or factory shifts, shook hers, men offering what they could, rifles, old hunting shotguns, sturdy arms ready for a fight if it came to that. She wasn't alone anymore, but even with the reinforcements, unease gnawed at the edges of her mind. Rex Dalton and the Iron Dogs weren't amateurs. They knew intimidation, they knew cruelty, and worst of all, they knew fear. How to spread it, how to feed on it like vultures circling a wounded deer. Catherine tightened her grip on the railing. She wasn't a soldier. She wasn't made for this kind of fight. She was a farmer, a woman who woke up with the sun and coaxed life from the soil with patience and prayer. How had it come to this? "You all right?" Jack's voice cut through her thoughts. She blinked, realizing he was closer now, wiping his hands on a rag as he studied her with that same steady gaze. "Just thinking," she said, "about how everything I've built could go up in smoke because a few punks decided they can take whatever they want." Jack nodded slowly. "That's what they count on, people thinking it's easier to give up than fight back. They never wanted to be part of a war," Catherine muttered. Jack gave a short, humorless laugh. "Nobody ever does, not the ones worth a damn anyway." The first stars were prickling through the darkening sky when Tommy pulled up, a battered Remington pump-action resting casually in his hands. "Neighbors are set," he said without preamble. "Rick and his boys are posted by the east field. Joey's watching the back fence. Will's on the ridge by the old silo." Jack nodded approvingly. "Good. Keep them low. If they see us ready, they might think twice." Tommy snorted. "Ain't banking on that. Men like Rex don't back off easy. They need to be taught a lesson they won't forget." Catherine caught the slight tremor in Tommy's hand as he checked his weapon. He was brave, no doubt, but he was scared too. They all were. Anyone with sense would be. A low, almost imperceptible rumble on the horizon set her heart racing. Headlights, faint but growing, crawled over the hills like spiders spinning webs of menace. Jack's voice dropped to a whisper. Positions. Tommy disappeared into the shadows without another word, blending into the darkness like he'd been born for it. Catherine forced her feet to move, her whole body thrumming with adrenaline as she ducked behind the stand. Her stand, the heart of her farm, now turned into a battlefield. Jack moved beside her, crouching low, his hand brushing lightly against hers in the dirt. A jolt shot up her arm at the simple, familiar touch. "You stay with me," he said. "No matter what." Before she could answer, the first of the bikes roared into view. 6 of them. Maybe more. Engines snarling, tires kicking up dust in their wake. The iron dogs swept down the driveway like a black tide, a show of force meant to intimidate, to terrify. Catherine swallowed hard, feeling the old instinct to run clawing at her gut. But she stayed rooted, heart hammering against her ribs. Rex led the pack, his monstrous Harley gleaming under the scattered moonlight, his sneering mouth twisted into a grin of anticipation. They didn't slow down until they were nearly on top of the stand, the engines cutting off one by one, plunging the night into a brittle, expectant silence. Rex kicked out his boot and dismounted, surveying the farm with an expression of mocked admiration. "Well, well, well," he drawled, his voice carrying across the yard. "Looks like the little lady decided to throw herself a party." Slim and the others laughed, low and cruel. Jack rose from his crouch, stepping into the open like a gunfighter at high noon. "You're not welcome here," he said, voice steady as a stone. "You were warned." Rex's eyes glittered with something like amusement. "Warned?" he chuckled, shaking his head. "Boy, you must have bumped your head harder than I thought. You think a few farmers and some has-been tough guy are going to stop us?" Jack didn't flinch. "You picked the wrong county," he said simply. For a moment the bikers shifted, the bravado faltering. Maybe they sensed it, the trap waiting around them. Maybe they realized too late that Catherine's stand wasn't just a pile of fruit and hope anymore. It was a fortress, and the people defending it were ready to bleed for it if they had to. Rex motioned sharply, and 2 of his men moved toward the stand, crowbars glinting in their hands. Before they could take 2 steps, floodlights snapped on, blazing down from the porch and the trees beyond. Catherine shielded her eyes, blinking, but she saw them, saw the shadows moving in the fields, the barrels of hunting rifles glinting under the harsh light. The dogs froze. Joey stepped into view from behind the silo, shotgun resting casual-like against his shoulder. Rick's boys flanked the east field. Will stood tall on the ridge. They were surrounded. "You got a choice," Jack called out, voice cutting clean through the stunned silence. "Turn around, leave, or find out just how much fight this town's got left." Rex's smile twisted into a snarl. "This ain't over," he spat. "No," Jack said quietly. "It's just beginning." Rex weighed his odds, his pale eyes flicking from face to face, reading the resolve in every set jaw, every ready stance. He wasn't stupid. Brutal, reckless, but not With a guttural growl, he jerked his head at his men. "Let's go." Engines roared back to life, tires spun, and one by one the iron dogs peeled away, spitting dust and rocks in their retreat. Catherine didn't breathe until the last tail light disappeared over the ridge. When the night finally fell silent again, she collapsed onto the ground, heart still thudding against her ribs, hands trembling in the dirt. Jack knelt beside her, his hand steady on her back. "You did good," he said, voice rough with something that wasn't just relief. Catherine looked up at him, a shaky smile breaking through the fear. "We did good," she corrected. Around them, the others began to emerge from their hiding spots, their cheers and laughter rising into the cool night air like a long-suppressed battle cry. For the first time in a long time, Catherine Hatfield felt something fierce bloom inside her chest. Not fear, not doubt, but pride. Pride in her land, pride in her people, pride in herself, and the unshakable knowledge that whatever came next, they would face it. Together. The victory was short-lived. The men celebrated late into the night, slaps on the back, jokes traded in low voices under the heavy stars. Catherine smiled and clapped along with them, but a pit remained heavy in her stomach, refusing to lift. Something in the way Rex had retreated, the venom in his final glare, gnawed at her, warning that this wasn't over. Real predators didn't just slink away after a single failed hunt. They regrouped. They came back smarter, meaner. Jack stayed close to her side as the last of the neighbors packed up and rolled down the long drive. He didn't speak much, just gave her those small, grounding touches, a hand on her shoulder, a glance that said he wasn't going anywhere. When Tommy finally pulled away with a gruff promise to check in by morning, the farm fell eerily silent again, the shadows pressing against the edges of the porch light. Catherine leaned against the porch railing, arms wrapped tight around herself. "You should get some sleep," Jack said, standing beside her. She shook her head. "I won't be able to." "Me neither," he admitted, a slight smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We'll keep watch." Hours crawled by, the two of them sitting on the top step, the old dog from the barn, Buster, eventually settling at their feet, snoring quietly. Catherine fought sleep with everything she had, blinking against the pull of exhaustion. Jack sat like a statue, head tilted slightly, every muscle ready to move if needed. In that quiet, her mind wandered back to the last time she had seen him, standing just like this 5 years ago, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, the hollow look of a man leaving not because he wanted to, but because he was convinced he had to. "You know," Catherine said into the stillness, her voice barely above a whisper, "when you left, I didn't know if I hated you or if I hated myself more for letting you go." Jack didn't look at her, but she saw his jaw clench. "I thought, if I stayed, I'd bring everything from over there back here," he said after a long beat. "And I couldn't live with the thought of ruining you, too." "You didn't ruin me," she said fiercely. "You broke my heart, but you didn't ruin me. I did that to myself, thinking I wasn't strong enough to stand without you." He turned then, eyes dark in the porch light. "You were always strong enough, Cat. Stronger than me." Silence again, but it wasn't as painful now. It was heavy with truths finally spoken. A low growl from Buster snapped both their heads up. The dog stood stiffly, hackles raised, facing the tree line beyond the fields. Jack was on his feet instantly, scanning the dark. Catherine followed, heart hammering, reaching instinctively for the shotgun propped beside the door. "Stay close," Jack ordered, moving down the steps into the yard. Movement flickered in the fields, not loud, not obvious, but enough to confirm every ugly suspicion crawling up Catherine's spine. "Jack," she whispered sharply, and pointed. Lights, faint but steady, moving in a semicircle through the crops. The bastards were back, but not riding in loud and proud this time. They were sneaking, hunting. Jack pulled a radio from his belt and clicked it twice, the signal they had agreed on earlier. From across the ridge, a corresponding double click echoed back. Will and Joey were still there, still watching. Jack motioned for her to stay behind him as they crept toward the barn, using the heavy structure as cover. Catherine's palms were slick with sweat around the wooden stock of the shotgun. Every step felt like a mile, every breath like it might give them away. Near the cornfields, they spotted them. 6 bikers moving low, weapons in hand. Not just crowbars this time, but chains, axes, a few bats wrapped in barbed wire. Rex wasn't leading them tonight. Slim was, which meant Rex had plans elsewhere. Or he was making sure he wasn't the one caught in the headlights if things went bad. Jack muttered under his breath, furious. "They're splitting up, trying to hit us from multiple sides." Catherine's gut twisted. "The house," she breathed. "They're trying to burn it." Jack didn't argue. He sprinted toward the porch, signaling with his hand, 3 sharp motions. Catherine broke into a run behind him, legs burning, lungs aching. Before they could reach it, a burst of shouting erupted from the east field. Shotgun blasts splitting the night. Will and Joey engaged. Jack yanked the radio again. "Hold position," he barked. "Hold them there." More shots, shouts of pain. Catherine prayed it was the bikers who were getting hit and not her friends. They burst onto the porch just as the first glass window shattered, a Molotov cocktail hurtling into the living room. Flames whooshed up instantly, licking the old curtains, the wooden floor. Jack threw himself through the door, using his jacket to smother the fire, stomping it out before it could spread. Catherine grabbed a pail from under the porch pump and doused the smoldering embers. Smoke stung her eyes, coughing her breath away, but the fire died. Not the house. Not today. Outside, engines suddenly roared to life again. The rest of the iron dogs pulling up, headlights blinding in the dark, illuminating the front of the farmhouse like a stage. Rex stepped into the light, arms spread wide, his voice booming. "You should have known better, girl," he shouted. "You can't beat us. You can't stop what's coming." Catherine stood beside Jack, shotgun raised, body vibrating with fury. "You think burning my house will scare me?" she shouted back. "You don't know a damn thing about me." Behind there, more figures emerged. Tommy, Rick, Joey, Will, battered but standing. Jack's hand brushed hers again, grounding her. "This ends tonight," he said under his breath. She nodded once. "Here, sure." Across the yard, Rex dropped his arms and sneered. "Then let's end it," he said. The engines revved, tires dug into dirt, and the iron dogs charged. Catherine tightened her grip on the shotgun, heart pounding like a war drum, and stood her ground. They would not take her farm. They would not take her home. They would not take her life. Not while she still had breath in her body. Not while she had Jack by her side. The night exploded into chaos. Jack moved like a shadow through the chaos, body low and controlled, every step measured. The bikers charged in a loose, reckless formation, thinking their size and noise would break the defender's spirit. But they didn't know the ground like Catherine and Jack did. They didn't know the uneven patches in the yard, the irrigation ditches carved deep and hidden by weeds, the weak fence posts set to snap under enough weight and topple whoever leaned too hard. Every step they took closer was a step deeper into a trap. Catherine ducked behind the old tractor as the first shotgun blast cracked through the night. One of the bikers went down hard, his bat flying from his hand as he screamed and rolled across the dirt. Will stood steady on the ridge, pumping the next round into the chamber with grim determination. Slim barked orders from the side, trying to push the others forward, but the advantage of the ambush was lost. The farm was awake. It was fighting back. Catherine rose from cover, shotgun steady, heart pounding in her ears. She spotted a biker sprinting toward the barn, a red can of gasoline swinging from his hand. Without thinking, she aimed and fired. The shot caught him in the leg, dropping him mid-stride, the can tumbling uselessly away. He howled, clutching his thigh, but Catherine didn't look back. She was already moving toward the house. Jack met her halfway, grabbing her arm just long enough to scan her for injuries, his eyes burning with a question he didn't need to ask. "I'm good," she gasped. "Go." Jack nodded once and veered off, cutting through the yard toward Rex. Rex saw him coming, saw the cold fury in Jack's face, and slowed his advance. He wasn't stupid. He remembered the last time they tangled, remembered how fast Jack moved, how hard he hit. "Big hero," Rex sneered, raising a chain-wrapped bat over his shoulder. "Still playing soldier for a woman who don't want you." Jack said nothing. Words were useless now. Only action mattered. They collided like two storm fronts, fists swinging, boots digging into the dirt. Jack moved faster, sharper, years of Delta Force training turning every motion into efficient violence. Rex swung wild, the the bat whistling past Jack's head, and Jack countered with a brutal elbow to the ribs. Rex staggered but didn't fall, spitting blood into the dirt with a snarl. Catherine fought her own battle near the porch, where two bikers tried to push past her toward the house. She fired again, the blast forcing one to dive for cover. The second kept coming, a tire iron swinging for her head. She dropped low at the last second, the iron slicing through empty air, and rammed the butt of the shotgun into the man's stomach. He doubled over, and she didn't hesitate, brought the weapon down across his back, sending him sprawling to the ground. Tommy and Rick appeared at her sides, weapons raised, driving the invaders back with short, controlled bursts of gunfire aimed low, not to kill, but to warn, to show that they would defend their land, their lives, by any means necessary. Across the yard, Rex roared and charged Jack again, this time landing a glancing blow to Jack's shoulder. Jack grunted, but didn't fall. He pivoted, grabbed the chain of the bat as Rex swung again, and used the momentum to rip it from the biker's hands. Rex's eyes widened just for a moment before Jack drove a fist straight into his jaw. The impact echoed like a gunshot, and Rex dropped to one knee. "You brought this on yourself," Jack said, voice low and cold. "You and every coward who follows you." Rex laughed, blood dribbling down his chin. "Ha ha ha! Ain't over. You think taking me down matters? There's more coming." Jack's mouth tightened into a grim line. He didn't doubt it. Men like Rex were just symptoms of a deeper sickness, the kind that festered in forgotten corners of the world, feeding on fear and power. But for tonight, here, they could end this. Jack looked up in time to see Slim screaming orders again, rallying the remnants of the Iron Dogs for another charge. Before they could regroup, headlights cut through the darkness, dozens of them, pouring down the main road like a river of steel and light. Sheriff Cooper's voice rang out over a bullhorn, sharp and commanding. "Drop your weapons, huh? Hands where I can see 'em. You're surrounded." The roar of engines died as reality crashed down around the bikers. Deputies spilled from cruisers, weapons drawn, tactical gear glinting under the floodlights. Catherine's legs nearly gave out from relief. Somewhere in the madness, Tommy must have gotten a call through, must have bought them just enough time. Slim threw his crowbar to the dirt, hands raised high, his face a mixture of rage and terror. The other bikers followed suit one by one as the deputies moved in, cuffing them and dragging them toward the cruisers. Jack hauled Rex to his feet, twisting his arm behind his back and marching him straight into the arms of two deputies who wasted no time slapping cuffs on him. "You're gonna regret this," Rex snarled as he was dragged away. "You're all gonna regret this." Jack didn't respond. He just watched them load Rex and Slim into the cruisers, the flashing red and blue lights painting the night in sharp, stuttering bursts. Catherine leaned against the porch railing, lungs heaving, sweat and smoke clinging to her skin. She felt Jack's hand find hers, steady, real, anchoring her to the earth as the last of the bikers were hauled away. Sheriff Cooper approached, his face grim but approving. "You gave us enough time to get here before things got real bad," he said. "You all held them off better than most would have thought possible." Catherine nodded, too drained to speak. Cooper looked between her and Jack, then added quietly, "Might want to think about pressing charges. Make sure this sticks." Jack squeezed her hand gently, letting her know she didn't have to make any decisions tonight. "Thank you, Sheriff," Jack said. Cooper tipped his hat and moved off, barking orders to his deputies. As the last cruiser pulled away, leaving only the battered farm and the bruised defenders behind, Jack turned to Catherine fully. "You did it," he said, voice rough with pride. "No," Catherine said, voice cracking with emotion. "We did it." The sky was beginning to lighten now, the first faint hints of dawn brushing the horizon in soft gold and violet. They'd survived the night. They had taken their stand. And somehow, standing here in the aftermath, Catherine realized something even more powerful than victory. She wasn't afraid anymore. Not of the future. Not of the past. Not of standing alone. Because she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Not ever again. The morning broke slow and soft over Hatfield Acres, a sky rinsed clean after a night of fire and fury. Mist clung to the fields like a protective veil, and every blade of grass, every battered fence post seemed somehow sharpened, made more real by the struggle they had survived. Catherine stood barefoot on the porch, a steaming mug of coffee cradled between her palms, watching the land she loved stretch and breathe under the growing light. Jack sat on the steps below her, one knee propped up, elbows resting loose on his thighs. He wasn't armored now, not in his posture or his eyes. The warrior who had fought through the night was still there, but so was the boy she remembered, the boy who used to drive out here in an old Chevy truck just to watch the sunset with her. Neither of them spoke for a long time. There was nothing that needed saying. Not yet. The farm bore the scars of the night. A scorched patch of grass near the house, cracked windows, a broken stand where the produce once sat, but it was still standing. Catherine was still standing, and when she closed her eyes for a moment, letting the rising sun warm her skin, she felt something deeper than relief. She felt pride. "You ever think you'd come back here?" she asked finally, her voice soft but steady. Jack turned his head slightly, a slow smile curving his mouth. "Every damn day." She blinked, surprised by the raw honesty of it. "I told myself I stayed away to protect you," he said, looking out over the fields. "But the truth is, I was scared. Scared I wasn't enough anymore. Scared you deserved better than the man I was becoming." "You were wrong," Catherine said simply. Jack's hand brushed against the wood of the step, as if grounding himself to it. "I know that now." The screen door creaked open behind them, and Tommy stepped out, balancing 2 paper bags in his arms. He gave them a mock stern look. "Figured y'all could use breakfast. That didn't come out of a MRE or a can," he said. Catherine laughed, a sound that felt foreign and wonderful in her own mouth. She set her coffee down and moved to help Tommy, ushering him toward the battered picnic table they had dragged out of the barn after the dust settled. Soon enough, more trucks rumbled down the drive. Will, Joey, Rick, and even a few neighbors she hadn't expected. Old Mrs. Langston from the church, the Myers brothers from the edge of town, all of them carrying food, tools, buckets of nails and planks. Nobody said anything about the battle. They didn't have to. Instead, they rolled up their sleeves and got to work. Rick and Tommy patched the windows while Joey fixed the busted railing on the porch. Will and a handful of others spread fresh gravel across the churned-up drive. Someone found a brush and began painting over the scorched barn door, whistling low under their breath. It was rebuilding, yes, but it was more than that. It was a statement, a promise. We stand together. We rebuild together. We do not break. By mid-morning, the farm already looked stronger, tougher, as if it had grown a second skin overnight. Catherine moved among them, passing out lemonade, giving hugs she might have once been too stubborn to offer. Her throat tightened more than once, but she blinked the tears away before they could fall. Jack stayed close, but didn't crowd her. He understood her rhythm too well. Knew that her strength wasn't about making grand speeches or putting on a brave face. It was in her hands, her eyes, her stubborn will to keep going. When the work slowed, when the worst of the debris was cleared and the worst of the wounds hidden under fresh paint and new nails, Jack found her again by the stand, or what was left of it. Catherine ran her fingers over the splintered wood, the once proud table now little more than a pile of firewood. She let out a slow breath. "I can build another," she said quietly. "Better than before?" Jack smiled and reached into the cab of his truck, pulling out something wrapped in an old army blanket. He set it gently at her feet and stepped back. She crouched and peeled the blanket away, revealing rough planks of cedar, sanded smooth and carved with care. A new sign, hand-cut and stained deep chestnut, with a single word across the middle in strong, clean letters. Catherine traced the letters with a reverence usually reserved for church pews. "You made this?" she whispered. Jack shrugged, suddenly shy. Started it a few months back, figured maybe someday you'd want it, even if you never saw me again." She stood slowly, cradling the sign to her chest. Her eyes met his, and for the first time since he had walked away 5 years ago, there was no wall between them. "You stubborn idiot," she said, voice breaking into a laugh. "You're home." Jack took a cautious step closer. "If you'll have me." Catherine didn't answer with words. She dropped the sign onto the grass, closed the distance between them, and threw her arms around his neck. Jack caught her easily, lifting her off her feet as she buried her face against his shoulder, her body shaking with the force of everything they had both kept locked away for too long. The others saw, of course. The whole damn town saw. And they cheered. It wasn't loud or wild, just a few claps, a few whistles, laughter low and knowing. But it wrapped around Catherine and Jack like a blessing, like the earth itself was welcoming them home. Later, after the food was eaten and the stories of the night spun larger than life, after the trucks rolled away and the farm fell quiet again, Jack and Catherine stood together under the vast open sky. The old fields stretched out before them, battered but alive. Their home. Their future. "I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring," Jack said, his hand finding hers. "But whatever it is, I'm staying. Right here. With you." Catherine squeezed his hand, the new sign gleaming faintly in the moonlight at their feet. "We've already been through the worst," she said. "The rest is just living." They stood there until the stars came out fully, until the fields whispered around them with the promise of seasons to come, of roots digging deeper, stronger, into the stubborn, beautiful earth. And for the first time in a long, long time, Catherine Hatfield wasn't afraid of the future anymore. She was ready to build it together. Right at the end.